we're going to be working on pinch pot bell forms next. It is another noisemaker. You're going to create a little pinch pot shape and also create a ringer and have a finished bell that will ring in the end. So you want to use both additive and reductive techniques. You're going to create a series of 3. They do not need to visually relate. Each bell can be different in appearance. I'm going to show you another example here. This is a bell shape, yet again a little higher pitch sounding, that has a little coil ringer and has some texture from a cleanup tool, from the curved side of a cleanup tool, and a decorative coil added. One thing that all of my examples have very much in common is a hole in the top so that we can slide a ringer string through, and that is how the ringer is connected. So you also need a hole in the top of the ringer. So you're going to want to create a ringer that relates to the bell shape. So for this bell, I purposely have one side a little bit lower than the other so you can see the raw clay contrast with the glaze outside. If you notice, I left my finger marks very visible on the surface of this simple bell form. I also related the ringer shape to the surface and the finger marks. For this ringer to bell relationship, you can see the repetition of coils. I have this curly coil as the ringer, coil at the top, coil at the bottom edge. That brings unity through the form. For this one, I have little subtle circles on that circle-shaped ringer that relate to the repetition of circles on the surface. Let's review how to make a pinch pot, and then I want to give you some specific tips on achieving a nice bell shape. You do not want your bell shape to flare too wide in the opening, or you'll have to like swing it too vigorously to actually get it to ring. So I'm going to angle the camera down a little bit so that you can see me pinching the form very clearly. So you want a golf ball size ball of clay. You can go a little bit larger if you would like, or a little bit smaller, that's absolutely fine. And then you're going to need a little bit of clay that you'll turn into the ringer. You want to make sure that any clay you're not immediately using, that you're wrapping up well. So I want to remind you to hold that form as you're pinching in your hand. Do not place it on the table surface. So you're going to place the clay in your non-dominant hand, and you're going to pinch with your dominant hand. I am right-handed, so I'm using my right hand to pinch. Notice that when I'm pinching, I'm turning my hand inward a little bit towards the center. That is allowing me to create a form that is very tight in the opening area, which is what you want for a bell that will easily ring. You also want that top part to come to a little bit of a point. So I'm gonna go ahead and start shaping that into that bell shape. This is the area that's going to have the hole where the ringer string will go. So I'm going to pinch and rotate. Make sure you're keeping that form under control. I'm also dragging that thumb up the interior wall to really get those walls nice and thin and even. So now I have a general bell shape, but it's a little lumpy, a little uneven, so I'm going to take a little bit of time to shape it and get it into a visually appealing shape. You may choose to create a bell form that is representational or non-representational. I have additional examples in that Noisemaker bell folder that you'll find on Schoology. So you can see several different examples of representational as well as non-representational fun bell shapes. So now you can see I'm getting a little bit more of a bell shape there. So now I'm going to take the time to play around with surface, working additively and reductively. I want to show you how to work on the surface of your form. So this is my bell shape, and I went ahead and carved some reductive lines in the surface, and I used the cleanup tool, the curved side. I dipped it in and out of water to create these lines that vary in width. So then what I need to do to refine the surface, I need to wring out my clay sponge really, really well, and then get in between each line as well as smoothing and refining the surface between the lines. You can see that there's going to be areas that kind of cover up a little bit whenever I'm smoothing and refining. So you just want to go back in with that cleanup tool and reopen that area using the curved side. So now that line is open again, and I can go back in with the edge of a damp sponge and finish my refinement. Refining the surface does take time. You want to make sure you really commit the time to do this. Refinement requires a lot of back and forth, in other words, between the sponge and whatever tool you're working to create your additive and reductive surface. So I'm going to open up each line over and over again as many times as it takes, and then go in with a sponge and refine. In the end, my entire surface should look as refined as this one side. You can see this is the refined side. This is not yet refined, big difference. You can also see that I cut a little bit of an uneven edge on that to relate to the surface that I have going on. I'm going to be adding coils in a little bit. Also going to refine the interior. It's a little bit sloppy in there right now. So that I don't mess up my edge, I'm going to use some paper towels jammed inside. That is a little risky. Never ever wrap up your bell that you want to keep soft with paper towels. It'll draw the moisture out of the form. If you want to retain that moisture, scrunch up a soft piece of plastic wrap or a soft trash bag. Ziploc scrunched up are a little too scratchy and rigid, but if you get a soft trash bag or plastic wrap up in there, that can be a great support until you're done working. You want to make sure that if you're taking a break from working on your bell and you're going to return to it, you want to get that in a Ziploc bag right away. Do not allow it to sit out. In the winter, things can dry out extremely fast. I have completed my bell shape, and you'll see that the surface is non-representational. In other words, it is composed entirely of lines and shape. I integrated additive, which are these little coils on the outside, as well as reductive work. And this is my little completed ringer that will sit up inside the bell. So after firing, bisque firing as well as glaze firing, I will then go ahead and place the string through the holes that I've created in the bell. You do not want to string your bell together until after firing. Otherwise, the string will just burn off in the kiln. So I want to remind you that with your bell form, you may choose to do a non-representational bell or a representational one. In other words, something that looks like a creature or an object. You do want to make sure, though, that you are considering the principle of design of unity, where the ringer shape relates to the bell shape, and that you're creating repetition of line and shape in your form so that it is overall unified.